Good afternoon again to everyone who's joined us for this amazing conversation with definitely a consequential leader in the United States Congress. Before I present the chairwoman, let me just take a minute to thank Third Way and to thank all of you for your continued support of the work that Third Way does. Without Third Way, I'm not sure if Democrats would have a way. So we're just so thankful for the work that Third Way does. And as most of you know, the people in Texas are experiencing things like we've never seen before, perhaps in some of our lifetimes. And so we just ask that you keep the people of Texas and the state of Texas in your thoughts, and hopefully they will get on the other side of all the things that they're going through and will come out better. Today we have the pleasure and the honor of having a dialogue with someone my mentor and friend, Jim Clyburn, describes as one of the most transitional leaders in the United States Congress. I do not have the time or the bandwidth to present her and all the things that she's accomplished throughout her life, but let me just tell you this. Not only is she the Congresswoman from Ohio's 3rd Congressional District, she served in the Ohio State Legislature from 1999 to 2008. In 2012, March 6th, she won a contested primary to serve, to be the Democratic nominee for Ohio's 3rd Congressional District. She won and has been serving in the United States Congress since her time in Congress. She has ran political stop signs, broke political speed limits, failed to yield political yield signs, all helping us get towards that more perfect union. She's a Delta woman, like my sister, and I'm so happy to have my friend, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, join us. Congresswoman, good to see you.
Thank you so much, Antjuan. It's always good to be with you, and I'm excited to have a dialogue today. We have so much to share and so much work to be done yet.
Congresswoman, I'll start here. You serve as the Congresswoman from Ohio's 3rd Congressional District. You have priorities as a Congresswoman. What do you see perhaps as some of the more consequential issues from your seat as the Congresswoman from Ohio's 3rd Congressional District?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for that question. When I think of the Midwest and Ohio, I also think of the nation. We are the heartland of it. I also think about the Congressional Black Caucus. I also think about the entire Congress. Right now, COVID-19 has to be at the top of everyone's agenda, in my opinion. And part of that reason is we still have people dying. Almost 500,000 people have succumbed to death because of the coronavirus. And as a member that serves as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Black Americans make up 13% of the national population. Yet, because of COVID-19, we are dying at 15 and 16%. But it's not just a healthcare pandemic, Antjuan. It is a three-headed pandemic from where I sit. It is looking at the economy and what we're going through, and it is also social justice. So healthcare, the economics of it, and social justice. And that's at the top of my list. Now, certainly as a small business owner, I am very concerned about what's happening to small and minority-owned businesses as that relates to the economy. We know small businesses are the economic engine to our economy. And then we still have to deal with so many of the injustices, whether that is our criminal justice system, whether that is housing or education or environment. So if I could bundle it all up in a basket, that would be what I would say that I'm leading with in Congress and in my 3rd Congressional District.
You know, Congresswoman, you touched on this, it is taking the oxygen out of every room. This pandemic, the worst pandemic since 1918 that's caused some of the worst economic challenges perhaps since 1932. But here's what I want to get to in our chat very briefly. We know the disproportionate impact this virus has had on Black and Brown communities. We know that Black and Brown communities are less likely to be tested, less likely to be treated, more likely to be on the front line working, more likely to die or contract this virus. And now we know, based on the data that's been put out, Black and Brown people are less likely to have received the vaccine to this point. From your perspective, dive in deep with us and talk about what that means for you, not only as the Congresswoman from Ohio's 3rd Congressional District, but also the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Well, I think when I look at it from whatever hat that I wear or when the questions are posed to me, my response is the same, and you said it best. We are affected disproportionately. We know there are disparities in healthcare. We know that Black Americans and other minorities are not included in clinical trials. We know that we have distrust issues, and rightly so, as it pertains to healthcare and medical care. Many of us also are reminded of the Tuskegee experiment, the Henrietta Lacks issues. And so that gave us pause. We've seen many great Black leaders a year ago say, I would not get the vaccination at this time. And in part, that's because we had a former administration and leaders at our highest level in the Trump administration who actually said this wasn't real, who actually said you could drink bleach or whatever and treat it and make it go away. It was not a top priority. And so we lagged behind in basic things like wearing a mask, sanitizing your hands, and social distancing. And many of us died as a result of this virus, and disproportionately. So what I say now is we have to trust science and medicine. We have to lead by example as Black leaders. And I am so proud in my district, a young physician, Black American, has put out a video that is amazing in the 3rd Congressional District. And when I think about what Dr. Laurel Espy Bell has done, she has put a video out that has some 24 Black physicians who get on there and they tell their story through a vignette. I'm also proud that the Congressional Black Caucus, because we write legislation, we send out messaging. We have put together a vignette where we have put data and statistics, but we also have rolled up our sleeves and we have gotten the vaccination and we have taken a photo of it and put it into a vignette that we are releasing this Wednesday as part of our Congressional Black Caucus rollout. You're going to see us go public with a lot of things. The CBC has a great history of doing a lot of great work with community leaders, with advocates, with the business community, with the legal community, the civil rights community. So now we are packaging all of that and we're going public with our power, our message, because why have it and not run a few stop signs and not yield when you need to? So I'm going to use that, and I like that. But we're also going to build on partnerships. I was excited to be here with you in Third Way because we need to embrace and look at what all groups and all Americans are doing.
You know, it takes a village, Congresswoman. That's what we're taught down in South Carolina. I know Ohio's the same. And speaking of village, to everyone who's joined us today, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. We will do our best to govern ourselves accordingly and get to your questions, because this is definitely a consequential conversation to have the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus. And speaking of the CBC, 50 years, the conscience of the Congress, and as I said to a reporter today, the conscience of the country.
Yes.
You are the chair in a historic year for the Congressional Black Caucus. Talk about what that means for you personally, not just as Ohio's 3rd Congressional District Representative, but also a Black woman. And it's surely a high time for Black women, but also 50 years, perhaps in some of the more consequential times, perhaps in our lifetimes. Talk about those things, and then finally, Congresswoman, on that front, the priorities of the Congressional Black Caucus under your leadership.
Well, when I think about my response to that, I'm sitting here as the chair of the most powerful organization in the Congress, the Congressional Black Caucus, the conscience of the Congress, or the conscience of the nation, as you have said. And so when I think about my colleagues entrusted me in this chairmanship during the 50th anniversary of the Congressional Black Caucus, as a Black woman, if I could go back 50 years, and just imagine what Shirley Chisholm must have thought when she was one of the 13, the only female in that room. And yet she was strong. She said she'd be unbossed and unbought. She dared to say that she would run for the presidency of the United States as a serious candidate. So I am elevated because of those shoulders that I stand on. I am elated, I am anxious, I'm excited, but I'm also very troubled. I'm troubled because in the time that I was sworn in on January the 3rd to today, less than 100 years, we have dealt with an insurrection, an inauguration, and an impeachment. And so when I think about how history will be written, I want to make sure that the legacy that I leave will embrace our power and our message, that we will be able to say that not only did we write legislation that made a difference in our civil rights era of time, but we passed it and people heeded to it. For example, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, passed unanimously by our caucus in the 116th. You will be seeing that come to the forefront very soon. We are hopeful now that we have the majority in the House, the Senate, and we have the Biden-Harris administration, that we will make our work worth it, because we all will remember and continue to remember 8 minutes and 46 seconds. We are still fighting for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I mean, and when we think about in states like where you live and hail from, we have one Black congressman. When we think about the powerful Jim Clyburn, our majority whip, someone who I like to say delivered the president of the United States. And the president said Black people helped him get elected and he'd have our back. I want to make Jim Clyburn's work worth it. I want to make sure that we have a HR 4. I want to make sure that we have a HR 1 where we talk about having a piece of legislation that we pass that supports the voting rights, and that we have legislation that supports our civil rights and supports our redistricting and how we are elected to office. Those are some of the things that are so important to me and to our Congress. I'm not sure if I lost connection with you.
You're here, you're here, I hear you.
Still here? Okay, my screen, everything went black on my screen. So I'm sorry about that. I just can't see you. So I will continue, sorry about that. So I wanna make sure that as I look at the economy, it is so important for me because we realize even before COVID-19, Black businesses were struggling. And now we know 41% of our Black businesses have defaulted, have gone out of business. And that's why I supported the relief packet. I think it's important that we provide assistance to our families, because what we do know is they put those dollars back into the economy. I want history to write my chapter, that I made a difference and that I stood up for the people, that I stood up for small businesses, and I fought for social justices. And at the end of the day, it's better for my grandbabies and those who are yet to come, that we're not just talking about a Joyce Beatty and a Jim Clyburn and a Hakeem Jeffries, who is our first of our caucus Democratic chair, but we are talking about those who are stepping in our footprints. Because if you only have one, and you're only talking about I was the first or I was the only one, that's a sad day. And I always say it's important when you can say that there was a second and a third. And that's what our founders did of the Congressional Black Caucus. The 13 of them made sure that then there was a John Lewis and a Eleanor Holmes Norton and a Maxine Waters and a Jim Clyburn. They wanted to make sure that there was a Congresswoman Marcia Fudge that then became Secretary Fudge. They wanted to make sure that there was a Robin Kelly and a Lauren Underwood, that there was a Black woman to chair our Science and Technology committee in a Eddie Bernice Johnson. As a matter of fact, 6 members of my Congressional Black Caucus chair major committees. I mean, would you have ever thought that I would be saying to you the Foreign Affairs Committee is chaired by a Congressional Black Caucus member, Greg Meeks, or that agriculture would be chaired by a Black man, Congressman David Scott? Or financial services, when we talk about the Federal Reserve and the OCC and the SEC, that we would be talking about Congresswoman Maxine Waters, or protecting our homeland security, that we would be talking about Benny Thompson. And then, of course, education and labor and commerce, we would be talking about Congressman Bobby Scott. So that's my story, that we will not just be saying 6 or be so proud that we had broken into areas untapped by us, but it would be the new normal for us to be in leadership positions and making a difference for years to come.
Speaking of years to come, Madam Chairwoman, our dear friend and brother, Cedric Richmond, always reminds me, and in fact, he did last night, you cannot govern if you do not win.
Yes.
In record fashion, Black voters came out in the 2020 election to deliver not only the White House, but majorities in the House and the Senate. As a result, the Congressional Black Caucus has its largest class ever.
Yes.
And it's a very diverse class. How do you as chair plan to help transition the various wings of the caucus, from personality to politics to age, to make sure that we are united on all fronts? Because as that modern day hip hop philosopher from New York says, Jay-Z, nobody wins when the family feuds.
Well, let me just say this, and I have taken a different perspective on our family. That's the number one question I get from people. But see, I sit on the inside of the family, and most families have brothers and sisters and nephews and cousins. But you know, when you come together for that family reunion, we all are in lockstep with how we respond, how we act. And so our family affair is one of a great tapestry woven in with all of the things that you mentioned. But here's the thing, we all want the same end results.
That's right.
We all are fighting for civil rights. We're all fighting for justices, or to correct all of the injustices that we're faced from. So we'll get there at the end of the day. Now, will we have some stumbles and bumbles and a rough road? Sure, because we have people who are to the far left. We have people who might go right down the center, and we may even have some people that lean a little the other way. But at the end of the day, I assure you, we come together for unity. We come together for the Congressional Black Caucus. And so if I have to take an extra day to let someone share their beliefs and their rights and just listen to them and then figure out how we get there, I'm prepared to do that. But here's what I really like about the Congressional Black Caucus in this class. We are diverse, but we are brilliant. When you look at the number of civil rights lawyers we have, when you look at, we have 4 nurses in our caucus. We have the first Black National Teacher of the Year in our caucus. We have members who have colleges and schools and post offices named after them. So when you look at our rich intellect and our rich history, it really puts me at an advantage to be able to pull everyone in and allow them to use their skills. See, the problem comes when you try to restrain someone or when you try to tell them they can't be them. And the perfect example is when we were all faced with the tragedy on January the 6th of the insurrection, we looked out after each other. We tracked down where the newest member and the most senior member was, and we wanted to make sure that everyone was okay, because that's what the Congressional Black Caucus is about. When you need us, we're there for one another. And that same thing will prevail whether we're talking about a piece of legislation or where we're talking about how we fund programs or projects. I assure you, we will get there for the people because we realize now our power, our message, and that's our brand. Too often people have said beyond our annual legislative conference, tell me about the CBC, or who is the CBC? Who's the Congressional Black Caucus? At the end of my watch, you'll be so sick of our meetings going public and on social media, you'll be able to finish the brand. You'll say, oh, our power, here's what they did. Our message, here's what they are about. So every member, you will hear us say our power, our message, and they will follow it with something of substance.
Speaking of power, speaking of message, a Black woman from Oakland, California, AKA member of the Lynx, HBCU graduate, former US Senator, former prosecutor, is now the Vice President of the United States. Yes. A man who's been battle tested and been through many other things in his life has perhaps come to the ceiling in his life of being the President of the United States. What would you say to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus?
I think what I would say to them is, first, keep your word. Words in action matter. I would say thank you. Thank you for recognizing our power and our message. I would say to Vice President Harris, continue with the tenacity that you had to get you where you are. And I'm comfortable saying that because she has been amazing in her reach and reaching out and having dialogues and conversations with us about the major issues. I would also thank them for putting Cedric Richmond, a former colleague and member of Congress, on the inside, someone who is a senior advisor, someone who is doing the outreach to not only our community, but all communities. I think it speaks volumes of the president to pick a partner in Kamala Harris as our vice president, for them to surround themselves with people of your generation, people of my generation, people from all walks of life. And that's how you really succeed. But I would tell them that we will be there for them. And there may be times that we have differences, but we will always be willing to come to the table to talk about our differences. I would say to them that the Congressional Black Caucus is here to follow, but we're also here to lead. I would remind them that we represent 17 million Black Americans and some 82 million Americans. So we come with a lot of power. but we also understand that we have a lot of work to do, and we do it best when we do it together if we're really going to build back better.
Speaking of the millions of Black voters represented by the CBC, I don't know a more consequential voting bloc in a generation, or loyal voting bloc, than the Black vote. What should we be doing to make certain that we just do not have flirtation with high African-American turnout in a presidential year, but in these midterms, that's going to determine life or death for so many other communities, and in other elections down the ballot? What should we be doing to make certain that the African-American vote stays solid, but also continues to increase in elections to come?
Oh, I think we have the best example of what we need to build on, and that's Atlanta, Georgia. That's when we look at, we have 2 senators now, a majority member and a Black American from Georgia. Both, probably people did not think early on that they would be able to survive the election, that they would win, and yet not one, but both. So I think you take that template that we have in Georgia and you take it to the Midwest where I am, and you take it across both of our coasts, whether that's the East Coast or the West Coast, because we have a template. We got energized and excited because we were told we could win. Now that we know we can win, now that we know we've had a Black president, a Black vice president, and a female, that should send the strong message that when we galvanize, when we get registered to vote, and when we take our brothers and sisters to the polls, when we fight back against voter suppression, when we fight back against purging our votes, we win. And we have a rich history of that. It's not just what we did in November of 2020. It's not what we just did in 2008 when we were campaigning for Barack Obama, or when we were advocating for more Black people on the ballot to run for president as candidates, and then to have one of them prevail as the vice president. We can go back to the tenacity we had in 1964 and 1965 when we were fighting for voting rights and civil rights, and we were making progress. We stand on the days of crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We stand on the days of Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis and so many others fighting for us to have voting rights. We just have to continue it. And we have to build on that platform beyond the South. We have to create the synergy and the energy. And I also want to say it starts with your generation. We have to figure out how to partner with those of your generation and those of my generation. Because see, for me, it's not an either or, it's both. It's just like we need old school politics and we need new school politics. You still have to get to those folks on the radio. You still have to get to those folks who want something in their hands when we're not in COVID-19. You have to use social media. You have to be able to put it in few letters and words, and you have to also put it on the TV so people can see it, and we have to put it on the radio where people can hear it. It's still a touch you and a thank you society. So I think it takes all of us to do it. And we have to put it in a language where the person on the street feels it versus saying that doesn't relate to me. Common language, common issues, and speaking to the issues. You know, people are losing their jobs, and that's real. People are still homeless, and that's real. 1 in 5 babies still go to bed hungry at night, and Black folks are still being discriminated against. And Black folks, yes, are in the White House and in corporate America, but still we have to fight for our rights. And so those are the things that I would say not only to the president and the vice president, but those are the things that I say to anybody who's listening. Don't forget to carry someone with you.
I'm going to ask you this and then we'll get to a few questions. 2022, I thought 18 was going to be critical, and it was. I thought 20 was going to be consequential, and it was. 2022 perhaps will be even more critical and consequential. Governor's races will be up all over the country, including in your home state of Ohio, US Senate seats, every member of Congress, and other down ballot races. You say what to the 2022 midterms as the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus?
Well, I think I say the same thing that you probably said in 18 and what I heard you say in the presidential election. Every vote counts. Yes, we cannot look at the 2022 election any less than we looked at the presidential, because you said it all. Think about it. How many governors we have up for election or re-election? Think about the members of Congress and those senators. When I look at the great state of Ohio and Senator Portman, Republican, announcing that he's not running for re-election, it gives us a time to put our best ticket forward, because those are the offices that sit in judgment of reapportionment, of redistricting. Those are the individuals that determine our state funding and what happens to us. Look at where we are in Texas now. Who would have thought that we would have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of individuals without energy or light or heat? This nation has so much that we have to protect. So I would say we have to protect all of those issues. And it's so important when we look at the down ballot. Judicial races will be up. And think about, we're fighting for social justice, and we look at all of the injustices. We cannot forget to go all the way down the ballot and vote for those judicial candidates as well. Too much to lose. And I would say, remember, it's always the right time to do what's right. Getting registered to vote and voting is always the right thing to do.
A few questions, and you've covered a bunch of them, but I'll lean in on a few. Small Black businesses in particular, because we sometimes say minority, and that doesn't always mean, in the eyes of some, Black businesses, small Black businesses. What will the CBC doing to make certain that they recover and continue to grow, expand, and start up? The Criminal Justice and Policing Act, George Floyd trial will be coming up next month. I think it's right around the time of your birthday, actually. It's going to be critical. You say what to that? And this dynamic that somehow exists between African-American men and Black women when it comes to showing up for elections.
Well, let me start at the end and work forward. I think we have to do a better job of building coalitions and collaborating with our brothers, our sisters, maybe because we were denied so many things, our right to vote longer than men were, our right to have a credit card in our own name, our right to purchase things. While we've all been suppressed by it, women were suppressed longer with so many things. So I think in the last decade or so, we have come out more into ourselves. You know, we didn't run for office. We weren't in high places because it wasn't what we did. We weren't encouraged. We didn't have a lot of mentors. And that's why we have so many mentoring programs through civic and social organizations. And so it is great to see so many of our brothers, people like you. And I say this all the time, how proud I am, but how honored I am to call you a colleague, because we are peers in the fight for what we do. So I think that it shouldn't be sisters over here and brothers over here. It should be brothers and sisters coming together and working together. And we've done a lot of work through our Panhellenic Council. We bring them in for our fraternities and our sororities. We do it through our HBCU. We have presidents of HBCUs and with our United Negro College Fund that bring in both male and females. So I think we have to stop talking about our women over here and our men over here. We are stronger together. So I think that's very important. When we talk about businesses, I'm so glad that you said in Black-owned business. I'm a former small Black-owned, female-owned business. And so often we were lumped again to the female piece. I could not check the box as a Black business and they made me check the box as a female minority owned business. And that put me in with other females who were not Black Americans or other minorities. And so we had to fight a long way to be able to look at what can we do for minority or Black owned businesses. Through our MDIs, we push through our CARES and relief packages to make sure that we pulled out dollars for those small minority Black owned businesses, because you saw what happened when we put our first round of dollars out, hundreds of billions of dollars, which sounded like a lot because $3 trillion was the most money we had ever allocated. And yet, when we looked at those small minority Black owned businesses, they didn't even get into the hopper to be looked at for funding. We had to reallocate other dollars to make sure that they were involved. So I think we have to look at that and figure out how we always make sure that we stand up for small minority Black owned businesses. And I'm pleased to say one of our Congressional Black Caucus members served in our last Congress as vice chair of the Small Business Committee, and that's Congressman Dwight Evans, who was out in the forefront making sure that we always talked about minority and Black owned businesses. I can tell you that Greg Meeks did an incredible job of making sure that we had dollars in legislation for our minority depository institutions, so they were more apt to be friendlier to those when we were going in to get access to capital, which we know is a major problem. I can tell you on my D&I committee, lastly, that we made sure that we brought in the president and CEO of the Black Chamber of Commerce, of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, because we have to support our businesses. We cannot forget that the small businesses are the economic engines. And when you think of small minority and Black owned businesses and what we bring to the table, that's a high priority for me.
Congresswoman, before I let you go, it's Black History Month. We amplify and add megawatts to the contributions, events, and so many other things in history that have helped shape the American experiment. I asked Jim Clive, I asked the whip this last night, so I ask you, looking back over your life, what single event and what person has probably transformed your life the most?
That is a very difficult question. So I'll do it in short sound bites. If I take my family and my mother out, who propelled me more than anyone in my life, I would probably say Congressman Lou Stokes / CJ McLean, who were a great partner and duo that convinced me to go to college. I am first generation and convinced me to go to an HBCU. Wow. And that changed my life because I was exposed to things that I would have never had the opportunity to see. And it propelled me to be in a continuous motion that puts me in the seat that I'm in today. So from my humble community of growing up in the neighborhood to becoming a college graduate multiple times, to running for Congress and winning against the odds, to being chair of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Congresswoman, thank you so much
for
joining the Third Way community. We are so thankful for you and your leadership. We're so thankful for the Congressional Black Caucus, the conscience of the country and the Congress. I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to all of you, our third way community, thank you all so much for joining us on a Friday afternoon with one of my favorite members of Congress. We're so proud of Congresswoman Beatty. We're so supportive of what she will do as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and we'll see you back soon. Take care.
Thank you.